Welcome back. Is government buying time by extending the national state of disaster by another month? There's been opposition to the move. AfriForum is now headed to court, while the DA called it nothing but a power grab. And Action SA says it's exploring all options to challenge the latest extension. Let's get reaction on this, as well as unpack the latest changes to the vaccination schedule in South
The Disaster Management Act is designed to deal with sudden natural or unnatural disasters which have national consequences, and where the government has to move with alacrity and get resources to assist as they need to. It was never meant to manage a multi-year pandemic, and a complex one at that. So the fact that it's still here is an anomaly. And months ago, even members of the government and the president were saying that it's time this thing was lifted because of the nature of the pandemic at this point. Yet we find month after month this extension, and it's not hard to see why, actually. You know, the Disaster Management Act confers power to the Minister of Cooperative Governance, and they have set up this committee, this NCCC, this lockdown committee, where a bunch of politicians and officials get together, ostensibly to assess all of the information before, deciding on the next move. And this is all without parliamentary oversight. It's opaque, it's untransparent, it lacks accountability. Indeed, this last few months have shown absolutely nothing that has come from this committee of any import to the pandemic, which even the Ministerial Advisory Committee, our scientists, have said has no place anymore and should be done away with. So we are as surprised as everybody else, but more than that, we're very disappointed.
And just to be fair to government, the reason they gave for the extension is that they're yet to finalize legislation that will come into effect to provide an alternative to the regulations implemented under the Disaster Management Act. Some are saying, what's taking so long, because you had so many months to actually come up with this. But let's move on. Many experts are also saying it's time to lose masks, because this can still be given some consideration and decision taken going forward without the national state of disaster being removed. So what's your thoughts on this, especially since some studies have shown that our population immunity is quite high?
Yes, so let's separate a couple of things here. One is that the government requires the ability to implement certain mandates at a given moment if the conditions require it. Nothing in the pandemic henceforth, we can't foresee any exigencies which would require the current state of disaster to mitigate it. If you want to extend mask wearing in the advent of the fifth wave, the current health legislation, together with its regulations, is more than enough to get you to do that. So we don't need the Disaster Management Act to manage masking. Masks work. We know that, but they must be the proper masks. Certainly, they are unnecessary outdoors, and the MAC has also agreed with that. Indoors, it may be required in certain instances, and there's no problem with that. And I think South Africans are used to that.
Yeah.
What you don't want is a situation where a blunt instrument like the Disaster Management Act is meant to deal with very precise and regulated and carefully managed interventions, because it can't do that. It has caused 2 million jobs to be lost in these 2 years. Just think of that number, out of the 11.5 million people employed. So it doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is the lack of parliamentary oversight. So the lack of accountability, where you get all sorts of extraneous agendas, some of them rather dubious, being pushed through. And there's nothing, as I've said, that is foreseen in the pandemic now, where the President, the Cabinet, the Minister of Health do not have adequate powers to deal with.
Yeah, very little makes sense to me very often when it comes to these decisions and some of our ministers. But let's talk about this. A second Johnson & Johnson booster dose has been approved for South Africans at least 3 months after their first booster dose. So tell me, what's the scientific reasoning behind this, and how necessary is it?
Okay, so first of all, the booster is necessary because immunity wanes even with vaccination. So overall, as a principle, that's fine. We have used two vaccines here, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine is a 2-dose regimen, and it now requires a booster dose. So a third dose has been recommended. The same, however, has occurred now with J&J, which used to be a single-shot vaccination, but which also demonstrated over time a waning immunity, and they've turned it into a 2-shot vaccination. So that second J&J is not really a booster in the conventional sense. It is part of the vaccination regime. And like the Pfizer one, after the second dose of J&J, it's recommended that you now take the booster, which we would strongly urge you to do. The difference about the heterologous boost, that means the mix and match, has been shown to be to produce quite superior immunity than just taking, say, a third dose of the J&J. And that is why it's being recommended right now. So if you've had 2 J&J shots, you should look to taking a booster dose with the Pfizer vaccine. You can do the same if you've had 2 shots of Pfizer and have a booster with the J&J. This is all proper, it's scientific, and it works. But it's very important to understand that the 5th wave is coming, so get your jab.
Thank you for making lots of sense to me tonight. I appreciate your insight, Dr. Aslam Dasoo from the Progressive Health Forum.